Hello, everybody, and welcome to Meet the Candidates on BCTV in partnership with the Commons and the Brattleboro Reformer. My name is Randy Holhut. I'm the news editor at the Commons, and joining me is Melanie Winters, who is the managing editor of the Reformer. And for the next hour, we'll be hearing from candidates running for the Windham Southeast District School Board. There are 5 candidates and 3 open seats, with the Brattleboro and Dummerston seats being contested. The Putney seat is uncontested. Melanie and I will spend the next hour asking questions of the candidates.
The candidates will each have 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions. We have our timekeeper here. She's going to hold up the yellow card when there's 30 seconds left and the red card when your time is up. Now, this is a chance for those of you at home to learn about the individual candidates and where they stand on the issues. There will be no debate between the candidates, but we will make sure that each candidate has a fair opportunity to answer each question.
So let's meet the candidates, and we'll start with the virtual candidate tonight, because it's on Zoom, Rich Levy, who's running for a 3-year term on the Brattleboro, for the Brattleboro seat.
Stand by. He left Zoom. He's rejoining right now.
Okay. That's what happens when you walk away from it. So we'll just pass the baton to the person who is here and doesn't have to worry about an opponent. That's Ruby McAdoo, who's running in Putney for a 3-year term.
Yes, and what was the prompt? Did you want me to just say hi?
Your opening, yes, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Okay, great. So my name is Ruby McAdoo. I reside in Putney, and I've served on the school board since 2023. And I'm really excited to run again. I hope people come out and vote. I know an uncontested election is one where, do I know that name? I'm not sure. So I'm trying to get people to be aware of who I am. I've really enjoyed serving on the school board. I think that there's a lot. The ground's not quite solid underneath our feet with changes that are happening at the state level. And so I'm really kind of want to be there and help shepherd us through to whatever the future holds. So, yeah. So I think that's it. That's me.
Okay, and we'll get back to Brattleboro now. And Rich, you're back on Zoom, live and in color, and you can give your 2-minute opening statement.
Great, thank you. Again, my name's Rich Levy. Been a resident of Brattleboro for about 11 years now. I've got 2 kids in the school system, one at BUHS and one at BAMS. And I'm running for the school board just because it's really all about community engagement and community development. And that's something that I believe very strongly in. And I feel like I can be a valuable voice in that conversation. For the past few years, I've been involved in the school district in various ways. I've been serving as the BAMS Leadership Council Chair for the past 3 years. And then the past 2 years, I've been the Brattleboro representative on the Independent Budget Review Committee. So a lot of my interest in the school board has to do focused kind of around the whole budget process and the budget development process. So if elected, I hope that I could be a valuable voice in that conversation.
The other person on the ballot for the 3-year term in Brattleboro is the incumbent, Kim Price.
Hi, my name is Kim Price. I was actually born in Brattleboro and moved away after college, moved back with my 2 boys about 15 years ago, and they went through Academy, BAMS, and BUHS and graduated. They're off now in the world, so I have an empty nest, but I've enjoyed being on the SD board for the past 3 years and working with Ruby and other board members. I think it's an important job. The students, our kids in our area, public school is sometimes the only way they're to get their education, and it's vital with just special education and needs for students. I had my oldest son had an IEP and had to have all of that special education due to dyslexia, and the public schools were a godsend to him. So I realized the importance of public schools and what they mean to communities. And I've worked on the finance committee. I've worked with Ruby on some of the other committees, PPE. We have worked, I'm done here. There's a lot that we still need to do. I want to continue to work on finance and make sure that we have a strong budget to support our kids while still representing the taxpayers and making things affordable for them.
And the two people who are on the ballot for Dummerston, we'll start with Paul Smith.
I've been a Dummerston resident since 2003. My son went through the Dummerston School and then through BUHS, graduating a few years ago. I did work for the district for 33 years, first as a middle school science teacher in Guilford, and then as a curriculum coordinator in the central office. I retired July of 24. And I am interested in serving the board, doing sort of providing my civic duty, and I feel I have some good background to support that. I am on a number of boards, including the Brattleboro Tennis Club. I was on the Vermont Mathematics Initiative board and the Southern Vermont Learning Collaborative board. I am a true believer in the work of boards. I think boards are a great invention for allowing the public to have a clear say in some pretty complicated systems like school systems. I think my experience as an administrator provides me with some good background and understanding of how the system works. However, I want to be clear, I'm not running on my administrative skills. That's the job for the administrators. A school board member really is sort of has a different skill set, and I think that's best summed up in the school board needs to ensure that the school is well run, not run it.
And the other Dummerston candidate, Daniel Everlith.
Hello, my name is Daniel Everlith. I am a resident of Dummerston, have been for a few years now. First and foremost, I am a parent to two young children at Dummerston School, the wonderful Dummerston School. We love it very much, and I love my community, and that's how I want to approach this coming off the bat. Aside from that, I have a background in marriage and family therapy. I've worked a lot with children and families in a systemic mindset, trying to address some of the behavioral and academic issues that face a lot of students today. Not only them, but the teachers and the professionals and paraprofessionals that are working within the schools as well. There's been a lot of opportunity for me to try to make some impact, I should say, on that side of the fence. And what I want to do now, running for the school board, is to try to make another impact on the other side of the fence, where I'm trying to work from a more background side of things, not directly with the students as much, but trying to help with the overall community side of things, the systemic side of things, and the students and teachers and everyone involved all together. That's mostly why I'm running, and I hope that we can keep that in mind.
Okay, Melanie?
Right, I'm trying to figure out what order we're going in now. Should we just start with?
Yeah, start with Paul. Start with Paul and the big question that everyone's mind.
Okay, first major question of the night, Paul. What are your feelings about Act 73? We all knew this one was coming, right? And the state's forcing consolidation of local schools into much larger unions or districts with the purpose of trying to save money. Especially against the wishes of the people. What can or should local boards do about this?
It's funny, we were just sort of talking about the implications. One of the pieces that I would like to hear more about is there any sort of understanding of how long is reasonable for a kid to be on a school bus? Because if the intention of consolidation is to close schools, which as far as I can tell, that's sort of the reduced cost by closing schools. I think in a state like Vermont, you have to look at what is the impact on students, and particularly in this case, what kind of bus rides are we talking about? I think that's a real practical issue that really needs to be addressed before we carry this much further down the road. I think it's also interesting to sort of think about what's the locus, the best locus of control for school systems. There was a point in time when there was there were several small schools in a given town, and then that was consolidated, and more recently we consolidated into multiple towns into the supervisory into the unified school district. So I think we need to have a discussion about where is the best locus of control. If it's the individual town, there are sort of questions. I'm not answering that very well. I think we have to talk about what is the best place for people to be responsible for the system. If it's too large, then I think some of that responsibility gets lost, that some of that accountability gets lost. If it's too small, it becomes too insular. Put it that way.
Okay. All right. Next, why don't we go to Kim next?
Oh, wait, sorry. I thought you were about to say something. Sorry. What we have done so far with the school board, we have joined the Rural Schools Community Alliance, and that's that's a statewide initiative with multiple schools throughout the state, and we are working with. We're working within that scope, and we're, trying to fight as much as we can to try to keep our local districts, because it's very important to maintain local admin over our budgets. Otherwise, we will have no control. If we do not have, if we're not overseeing our budget, and it's just, we consolidate into one massive district of 4,000 students, encompassing, for example, all of Windham County. You're not going to have the local budget control. There will be certain people on that district board, and we won't have the votes to say, no, this is too much money that we're spending. So working with the RSCA has helped, but we also need to fight back with the state, because the state's just throwing these things out without any real details about how they want everything to happen. And the task force, fortunately from this summer, said, no, we can't do what you want to have us do, because there's not enough information to make it a reality.
Thank you. Daniel, what do you?
Sure. I'll start off by saying I don't particularly like the idea of consolidation, especially if it means closing schools. Just to piggyback off of what Kim was saying, that I don't like the idea of having to push our budgets based on like what the state and what other people are trying to tell us without quite understanding, the rural mindset, or at least what Vermont needs, what the students need, what the teachers and the professionals also need. I don't think that we should be jumping into or forcing anything or moving things past, the time that they would need to be placed to review some of these things and talk more about what would be the best viewpoint, I guess, for Vermont, for the school system. I don't necessarily think that the issue is solved by closing schools or reducing costs in that way. I think that even going down that route will also incur other costs too that may not entirely offset the benefits that we're trying to achieve. when it comes down to it, I think there are a lot of budget concerns, and I personally don't like to see the education system being on the chopping block for it. I think that there are a lot of things that we need to have investment in. I think students, education, and the growth of our community are three things that we should probably keep at the forefront whenever it comes to budgetary spending and funding. And there are a lot of unfortunate things happening on a national level and on a statewide level. But I just don't want to see the education system be part of the solution, especially when it comes to reducing that.
Thank you, Dana. Ruby, why don't you take the question?
Sure. I think that I don't want to repeat some of the things that the other candidates have said because I agree with a lot of what they're saying. But I'll just kind of share that my own perspective is that I have a little bit of PTSD around Act 46 and the experience around that. In Putney, our town voted very unanimously, not unanimously, but heartily not to merge, and then were forced to merge. And so I'm feeling a little bit like there's some writing on the wall. We know where we're going, and I want to fight, and I want to like push back, but I also want to be realistic. You know, we are going to be merged somehow. And so I think that's that reality is what causes me as a board member to vote in favor of aligning ourselves with the Rural Schools Community Alliance, because the time for advocacy is now, and that group is who is going to Montpelier. They are hoofing it up there and giving us a voice. And because I don't have the answer. I don't think anyone on our school board has the answer of what would the map look like, but we know there's going to be a map. There's going to be a change. And so I'm trying not to be too like doom and gloom about it. I want to be positive, and so that's kind of the approach I'm trying to bring.
Okay, thank you. And so, do we have Rich back?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what echoes what everybody else has just said. I mean, I think there's two different ways, two different perspectives to look at it from. The first being the financial end of it, which my understanding is the primary driver behind Act 73 to begin with, is trying to rein in education spending. If you look at the formulas that are in Act 73 and you compare them to where our current budget is right now, my very superficial reading of it, admittedly so, is I don't see a huge financial difference between where we are now and where Act 73 is going to put us. And so it just begs the question, well, why are we doing it? We're going to essentially be in the same financial position all the while relinquishing control over our school districts. So that's a big question to ask. I mean, I guess the question there is, what happens if there isn't a cost savings that is supposedly the driver behind this? And, admittedly, that's a rhetorical question because I don't think anybody has the answer to that. What it means for kids on the whole in the school systems as it is, I think our current school districts, I don't know how much of an impact it's going to have on our kids. The latest map that I saw us combining with Windham Southwest, I believe. And so I think it's going to have a bigger impact on those kids. And I think it's a legitimate question. You don't want to sacrifice the quality of the education, the quality of the experience just for finances. And particularly if those financial promises are not realized.
Thank you, Rich.
But on the other hand, we have some of the smallest schools in the state, and the cost of running those schools keeps going up, and the enrollment keeps going down. Can you make the case to the taxpayers out there that are watching their property tax bills keep going up and up, why it is so important to have a small school even, and the quality of the quality of education that would come from a small school. And I believe Kim is up next.
Small schools in our communities, yes, Brattleboro has 3 elementary schools, but all of the towns outlying, they have 1 elementary school. And that school is the heart of that town. It's a lot of times where they hold elections, where they have meetings. Community schools are vital for communities to survive. If you're moving into an area and you're moving to a town and that school is getting closed, you're not going to want to move to that town. Your property is going to go down because the property value of your house is going to go down because you've lost your school. It's just, it's that snowball effect where once that school is gone, the town is going to start to die off because you're not getting the influx of new people coming in. And having a strong school district is a very big, it will pull parents in. If they know that they're moving to a strong school district, it's going to encourage them to move and start new businesses, or encourage other families to move into that town. And having a local school is just vital for our towns.
Daniel?
Yeah, I actually would agree with pretty much everything that Kim just mentioned. I think a local school, especially in a rural community, is completely necessary for the health and overall wellness of the community. That's where, she said, elections are held, where people get together, where parents can communicate with one another, where birthday parties are held and sporting events are held. That's basically the only place where the town has in rural areas like this, especially when population is so spread out, especially over like mountainous regions like we have. I think there are a lot of benefits that could be spoken about to keeping smaller schools. What it comes down to, unfortunately, is funding and budget. But my understanding of this is that the rising costs are kind of secondary to other rising costs in the state, and such as healthcare and health insurance. I don't necessarily think to solve one problem we create another problem. That's just one thing that I feel very strongly about, and that's what I'll answer.
Rich?
Yeah, I think the promise of consolidation is in greater efficiency, and that's not always what actually ends up happening. Smaller schools, rural communities, there's a character there that can and will get lost in a bigger system. That being said, that may require you to get creative on on the funding mechanism of it works. And I think there are solutions to that problem. But I don't think those solutions necessarily lie in any sort of consolidation. Consolidation, I think, is dangerously kind of teeters on everybody sort of fights for their own voice, and they almost end up isolating themselves. And I think it has the potential to actually drive costs. So, I think keeping schools smaller, respecting our rural communities, is really respecting the character of those communities and the people who live there. And if you can do that while getting creative on the funding mechanism, I think you could have a very successful system.
Ruby?
I have 2 children who are at Putney Central School, currently in the middle school, and they've been at that school throughout. And I've seen over the years that there are some kids who thrive in a very small school and some who really needed something different. And I think, you know, it predates my time on the school board, but in our district, we did have a decision at one of our, a town, this might have been before we've merged, but in Guilford, they made a decision to close their middle school. And Paul might be able to speak to that because I think he was around at that time. And that was a decision that was made locally within that town. And so more than anything, to me, it's not about keeping us small. It's about respecting and honoring the desires and needs of each community. I know in Putney, our Putney Central School has really leaned into and become a community school and received a grant for it and is developing programs and trying to really enhance the school as a hub in our community. And that I have seen real tangible impact of that. And so I personally really believe that type of approach might be the answer. So it's not about keeping us small. It's about becoming an integral part of our community. And that's going to look different in Guilford and Dummerston and Putney and Brattleboro. But I certainly know that my own experience of my kids at Putney Central School as a small school has been divine. It's been lovely. But I do know that there are some kids who've needed something larger and different.
And that's certainly where your expertise, Paul, comes in because of the experience at Putney Central and moving the upper grades to BAMS.
Guilford, yeah.
Guilford,
sure.
sorry.
And I guess I sort of want to open up a little bit of a different dimension, and that is the experience of students. I think, and based on, in part based on my experience teaching in a relatively small school in Guilford, I start to wonder about the question, is it possible to get too small? And I think it is. I think when the experience of children, when the class sizes get small enough that the experience of children suffers, then I think the school has become too small. I don't think any of our schools in the district right now are too small. If trends in enrollment continue, I think we may actually reach a point sometime when there aren't enough kids to really power the grade, the classroom. I know of some situations where schools have had like 9 kids in a grade, and I think that was really problematic. You need, as a teacher, I know you need some sort of critical mass to make the learning happen. So I think it is possible to have schools that are too small. As I say, I don't think that we're at that point right now. And I certainly think that having enough students to really power the grade is important, and it's also more efficient from a staff to student ratio. So as we talk about consolidation or not, I think that also has to be part of the mix. We need to look at both sides of that. I agree with Ruby that it's a community decision, but let's also, as part of that decision, take the experience of students into account.
Okay, the next question speaks to proficiency and the quality of education. Vermont consistently ranks among the top, probably the top 10 in the country, but in recent years it has been slipping. So I was hoping you could share your thoughts on what is driving that trend and what can we do to reverse it. And I think we're starting with Daniel.
Sure. In my opinion, part of what's driving that trend is something that, we all experienced a few years ago, which is the pandemic. I think not discussing any of the overall trends and what we had to do in order to keep everything afloat during that time, which was very, up in the air, and no one really knew what to do or how to proceed in a situation like that. We do have some unfortunate fallout from it, and being that we have a good chunk of students, a good couple years where we were doing some long distance learning and we were trying to catch up that way, and I think that unfortunately gave a little bit of a speed bump, and I think probably affected rural communities a bit more than it did suburban and urban communities, just for the basis that we've discussed tonight, which is, the geographical concerns and population density and, the amount of kids and, the technology that needs to happen. I don't think we necessarily were in quite the best place at that time, which I think probably drives a lot of the slipping that we've experienced. I think if we continue to keep education and we continue to keep, the overall health and quality of, the school system at our forefront, I think we can continue to work through that little hiccup. It reminds me of just like if you get like a bruise on your nail, it grows out. Unfortunately, you can attend to it. You can try to do the best you can, but you can't erase what happened. You can only try to support it best you can moving forward. And I think if we continue to try to support that, I think there's a lot of behavioral issues that we need to address, a lot of behavioral support, mental health that we could probably apply. I know I'm biased a little bit with my background in mental health, but I do think that that's one of the necessary components that we could probably keep or at least improve upon.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, over to you.
Yeah, I think obviously the main driver behind the dip was what we experienced a few years ago and trying to climb back out of that. Testing scores, they are improving. It seems like they're improving sort of consistent with state averages. Our graduation rates have been increasing, which is really positive. So I think we're doing something right. I agree that I think one of the big hurdles to it all is that there seems to be increasing needs for social services in the school systems and addressing that. And I know that that's been difficult to maintain from a financial perspective since funding has run out that financed a lot of those positions. And I think it's something that we need to seriously look at how do we maintain those same level of services? Because at the end of the day, it's the schools are just such a hub it's such an overall experience. It's not just about literacy and math and, et cetera. It really is an entirely encompassing experience. And I think the more positive, holistic experience you can create for the kids, they're just more apt to thrive in that sort of environment. And so I think that that's really, on top of the literacy and the core classwork and such, I think that's really an area that we need to be focusing energy on.
Thank you, Rich. Ruby.
Yeah, so I agree with everything the other candidates have said so far. I would say that I'd say a potential silver lining that I see with the idea of consolidation is around curriculum and implementation, something that I think that has been a marker of some of the successes we've seen that Rich mentioned around some of our assessment levels at the district level come from implementation of curriculum throughout our district. And so I think there's a lot to be said about really embracing and working on that. And our district does a great job at that. And the curriculum office, Superintendent Spino, they are really at the helm, trying to figure it out, trying to push us forward. And I think we've seen results in that. And the last thing I'd say is I read an article recently in the Atlantic that the crux of it was we should be asking our kids we shouldn't be asking them to do less, we should be asking them to do more. So rather, like a kid's having a hard time reading Moby Dick, so we don't, assign Moby Dick, but like how do we get back to asking our kids to do bigger, difficult things? And that's, going to be different at grade 1 versus grade 12. But it was a really intriguing kind of thought process, thinking through that in terms of within our district, within my own kids and within other kids in the district. So So it was just interesting to think through.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Paul.
Sure, I would agree that the learning loss associated with the pandemic was real, is real, and is taking some time to work through, and appears from the data that we're seeing to be worked. Sort of that's in process. I think another factor creating a lot of headwind is increasing disparity in terms of economic position. And we know that if kids are coming to school stressed about food, stressed about their home situation, those are factors that are going to have an impact on their learning. And no, the school board can't solve the income disparity issue, but I think we should recognize that that's one of the pieces that's creating, as I say, creating the headwind that we're doing our best. The school system is doing its best to overcome, and that takes work and takes time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm last, and everybody's said a lot of everything. But back on the curriculum, unfortunately, when Paul retired, we brought Bryn on, but then we were able to create 2 positions, and we have a curriculum coordinator for the elementary schools, but now we have one for 7th through the high schoolers, and focusing on the high school, which, had not been, it had always been a focus, but now it's really a focus, making sure we're getting those graduation rates up. And, we're able to do that, which is a huge change for the district. And one of the other things too that the district's looking at after COVID, you had attendance issues as well. Students, not even for something that they had control over, were late, were not coming to school. And that's been a focus that schools have taken on this year. And they're working to make it exciting to come to school, and, offering incentives for students to get to school on time, come to class. And the attendance rates have gone up this year because of the focus that the schools have had on attendance, which if the child is not in school, they're not going to learn. And we just need to get them to school.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there's been a lot in the air about federal guidelines and policies. And perhaps the biggest one that's been at issue is the question of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that has been an issue in Windham Southeast for many years, and an issue that the district has tried to deal with. But in the face of all the headwinds from Washington regarding these policies, what can Windham Southeast do to uphold decency and empathy and the kind of values that we think we have as Vermonters? And Rich, you can start with that one.
Thanks. I think what we can do is kind of what we've been doing. I give the people in our district a lot of credit. I think we recognize and acknowledge the diverse group of people that make up our community. And at the end of the day, any policy that we may create or whatnot is really just rooted in humanity. It's just treating people with respect and dignity, like you said. I think that there is a good amount of awareness in the schools for, like I said, the diverse population of students that make up those communities. And I would encourage us to continue down that path and yes.
Ruby.
I have been sitting on this board for 3 years, and I really feel like there's good work happening in our district, and I feel a lot of comfort in both our community members, our administrators, our teachers, our fellow students. I feel there is a real kind of synergy around, aligning with this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion at a moment when there are, at the national level, just strife. I don't feel the strife, and I feel really happy about that. And I say that, as a board member, but also as a parent, as a parent of kids and in a family that reflects a lot of diversity. And I have always felt supported, and I have always felt that the policies that we have and the way in which they're implemented have been have made my family feel welcome. And how do we continue to do that for every family in our district? I firmly believe that the approach that our community has taken, which is to embrace and to think about those words, DEI, as being a critical part of how we move forward. I can't imagine, doing this work in any other way.
Paul?
I agree with Ruby. One thing that the school board can do is set and enforce policy that maintains diversity, equity, and social justice. I think the other important thing that a school board can do is monitor the data, or make sure that the administration are monitoring the data, that give us some insight into the degree to which we have a diverse, equitable, socially just community. That is, student surveys, parent surveys, teacher surveys, look at performance of students disaggregated by a number of factors, and also sort of suspension data, what attendance data, what are the other data that we have that may show us that some elements of the community are not feeling equitably served.
Kim?
Piggybacking off what Paul said, one of the board's goals this year is in regards to HHB, hazing, harassment, and bullying, which again, is more wide encompassing than just DEI, but exactly, it's part of it, and we're asking to get the data from admin, so that we're able to review. We want to know how many times have situations occurred, how many things have been investigated, and what's the follow-up, what are the consequences, so that's a board focus that we've had for this year, and we're all I'm very intent on HHB and making sure every student feels safe coming to school, because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to want to come to school. And if you're not in school, you're missing out on all that education that you need.
And Daniel?
Yeah, also to echo everyone's sentiments. I completely agree with everything said. I think just even to echo Rich's statements, Vermont has had a lot of success in keeping these issues at the forefront of our conversations. I'd like to see that continued, and also to echo what the other candidates have said too regarding the data sharing. I do think that we need to have a lot of transparency regarding that. I think that it's important, especially for the board, to get that information in a timely manner and in an open manner where everyone feels safe and comfortable enough to share it, so that we can address any issues that might come up. Even discussing the other aspects of DEI, like you mentioned, with like hazing and bullying and harassment, I also want to include along with that too, just like economic issues, economic disparity, and things like of that nature, like basic needs that are available to everyone, to make sure that we all kind of ensure that every family has the same success. And I think the biggest thing we can do as a board is probably just reviewing data and making sure that the current legislation that we have, the current rules in place, support success. And if we need to change anything, we can change it. But as long as we ensure that we get all of the right information to start.
Okay, I would actually like to expand a little bit more on the bullying issue. It's no surprise that Vermont embraces DEI. It's that kind of state. But yet bullying exists. And we have covered stories of formal complaints of bullying. We have seen the chatter on Facebook or social media. The schools do nothing. My kid doesn't feel safe. And we know that the schools are doing something. We know that the schools are trying to take steps. But what do you do when you can't reach the home environment where this is starting? So what can the schools do about that? And we're going to start with you.
So I think, and I mentioned it earlier, I think that initiatives such as community schools can have an impact on embracing and expanding social workers in each of the schools that help to bring support into the schools, to the home, particularly in homes that are less receptive and just pushing back and closing down. So I think that is one element. I also think that it is, something I've thought about recently is around the reality that we, when you have a hazing, harassment, and bullying situation, when your kid has experienced that, there's sometimes a lack of satisfaction. Like you want justice. You want your kids, to feel safe, and for the person who has done this horrible thing to have a consequence. And sometimes you don't learn about the consequence, or you don't learn about the fullness of what are the consequences that this individual has experienced. And that is what causes people to go on social media and comment and say, well, they're not doing anything, when the reality is there's a lot that's being done. And so I try to remember that, because whether it's in my own experience with my own kids and what I've seen, or at a school board level, that's a reality that there are going to be people that never feel satisfied. And so how do we serve them, but also understand that's going to be real?
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, going along with what Ruby said, I think the most important thing that the school board can do is ensure that schools are safe places, and modeling appropriate behavior, modeling how to effectively deal with each other, even when there are conflicts, so that you avoid bullying and harassment. I think that it's also true that we could be clearer about how the investigations of hazing, harassment, and bullying happen, and why sometimes you don't hear, because those are the guidelines that are in place. That's the protection of student privacy. There's some important issues there that I think folks could learn a little bit more about. But certainly the board could absolutely make sure that the system is following those procedures in a reasonable way, and following up on instances where HHB is reported.
Okay, and Kim.
I feel bad saying following up on these two, making sure that that the school board is transparent as much as they possibly can, because unfortunately, with students, you still have to. There's still protection for students, and so you can't always know, like they've said, the consequences. But keep bringing it up with the admin and having them come in with data and keeping it on the radar in meetings, so the community can watch all of that and see that we're trying to stay on top of it. And we know admins are trying to stay on top of it as much as they possibly can. The problem is sometimes, like you said, community and back at home. And as much as schools can do what they can to try to, say, this is what we need to be when we're here in school, it becomes more of a community issue. And, schools cannot be responsible for every issue that happens in the community. Teachers have enough on their plates to now be like, oh, we've got to, we can't control what's happening in somebody's house. We can try to curtail it and, redirect students, but that becomes a community issue, not just a school issue.
Okay, thank you. And Daniel.
Yes, I actually, I have a bit of a unique perspective on this, I think, just because I did work at a job at Yale about many years ago where it was in-home therapy, where we addressed a lot of systemic issues for children and families in the home, but also in the school and in the community. Part of my job was I was going into the schools, observing some of the classrooms, the students in it, and working directly with both the students and the teachers and paraprofessionals and social workers and admin staff to ensure that the necessary modifications and supports were in place for the students, and that everyone was getting what they needed, basically, to put it simply. And I think, again, echoing what other people have said, it's not necessarily the school's responsibility, but I do think that there is a strong argument to be made that the school, being part of a community and being such a large part of a community, especially in a more rural area like we have in Vermont, there is a lot more responsibility of the school to be connected to the community itself. Just as an example, my students go to Darmstadt, my children go to Darmstadt, and I think one thing that I really loved about it is in pre-K we had the pre-K teachers come in and visit and see what it's like in the home, both as a hello, get to know you, to help the children feel a bit more comfortable about going to school, but also to, from the other side of things, to help the school to see what they're dealing with, and having those open connections, I think, really support a lot of the work that a board could do in ensuring that there's a lot of success on the over side of things, where you have everyone working together to ensure that things are being appropriately followed, but at the same time, you want to make sure that on a one-to-one level, the staff and the students feel like they're part of the school themselves too. I think if we can make sure that keep that gap bridged, I think you'll see a lot more success with those.
Thank you, Daniel. And Rich, your turn.
Yeah, I think this all just speaks to, it kind of goes back to some of the previous questions as well, and demonstrates the role that our schools actually do serve in our broader community, in dealing with systemic issues throughout the community. I can't speak to social media. I'm not somebody who really understands it myself, but unfortunately it's an unfortunate reality in our society and with our kids these days. And I think the way to deal with it, I mean, honestly, I think it's a continued investment in the social services that we have in the schools. I think that's a really big part of it in dealing with the issues at the school level, but also because those are the people who actually, more often than not, are going to serve as liaisons if there is an issue at home to try to help address the issue at the source, or in the home if that happens to be the source of whatever issue they're dealing with. And the other part of it is community engagement, because I think there is a lot being done at the schools. I know directly from my work on the BAMS LC, I mean, middle school is a tough time for kids. And I know that they deal with a lot of social media issues. And we talk about it a lot at our LC meetings. I know the school, they're very conscious when there are issues going on. They're very conscious of it. They are very much trying to deal with it. But the point is, we talk about it in the LC meetings so that the parents who actually come to the LC meetings, they know that something is being done. And I would love to see us figure out a way that we can foster more engagement in that way, because I think people would realize that there's a lot more being done.
Okay, we come to the end of the program, so we'll give each of you 1 minute to make your final closing argument on why you should be voted on to the board, and we'll begin with you, Paul.
Well, the first thing I would say is I think that the school district is in a great position because, as far as I'm concerned, if either Daniel or I win, it's a win for the district. So I would say, for me, I think I would ask for your vote if you feel like the experience that I have and the perspective I have, as demonstrated the discussion this evening, sort of is in alignment with how you think the system should be run.
Kim?
I would just love to continue the work that I've put in for these last 3 years. It's the first year or two, you're really putting your foot in the water, and I have really enjoyed working on the finance committee and a bunch of the other committees. I actually worked with Rich on the BAMS LC. He's again, community is going to win either way with one of us. But I would love to continue working because I think we still have a lot of work we need to do.
Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think everyone here is a great candidate. I think we could all provide a very valuable viewpoint and support to the system. I think I would also like to throw my hat in the ring. I think I have a unique perspective with my background. I think I have a good perspective as a current parent, and I would like to just continue to try to provide support and make my community stronger in any way that I can.
Are you frozen again?
Nope, you're still there.
My turn? Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it did freeze. Thank you to everybody who's stepping forward to running for the board. I think this is a great group of candidates, and we would be fortunate to have any one of us serve on the board. As for me, I think where my interests line and what I have been involved with in the school system the past few years, that being the community engagement part of it with BAMS, as well as the budgeting and finance end of it on the IBRC. I think those are skill sets that would lend themselves as valuable to the current system and to the potential changes that are coming.
Someone who's unopposed, I am not going to make a pitch for voting for me, but more a pitch for people to vote. As we've merged, we've seen a kind of decline in engagement, and I sympathize with that in part because it's confusing. Why do I have to vote for you? I don't live in your town. And so I just encourage people to, hopefully watch this, and thank you to BCTV and all of the hosts, but to vote on the 3rd of March by ballot. You can also get absentee ballot. I'm sure at this moment you could. Some people have already voted. And this is really important, we have an annual meeting, a school district annual meeting on March 17th at 7 p.m. in the BUHS gym. And that's an in-person meeting, and that's where we vote on our $60 million budget. And that's when you vote for who is going to sit on the board, you're voting for the people who are spearheading that budget development process. So thank you. Hopefully everybody comes out and votes.
Okay. And I guess that brings us to the end here. A sincere thank you to all the candidates who took the time to be here and via Zoom. A recording of this live stream is available immediately on Brattleboro Community Television's YouTube page and will be up on their website and broadcasting on Comcast channels 1078 and 1079 in the days to come before the election on March 3rd.
And since Ruby gave the election and media information better than I can, all I can say is thank you, everyone, and good night.